A secretary gives her boss a vintage record as a gift. The song that plays reveals a shared past they never imagined. Hello and welcome to 80s Love Stories, where I, your favorite narrator, Christopher, bring you an exciting love story straight from the unforgettable 1980s. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. Victoria's fingers traced the weathered edges of the record sleeve as she stood in the dimly lit vinyl shop. Crown Records. The musty scent of old albums filled her nostrils, bringing back memories of weekend afternoons spent in places just like this. Outside, the neon signs of downtown Chicago flickered to life as dusk approached, casting a warm glow through the store's dusty windows. "You sure about this one?" asked the shop owner, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. "It's quite rare. Might be a bit steep for a secretary's salary." Victoria smiled, clutching the record closer. "Some things are worth the investment, especially for someone special." The words left her mouth before she could stop them, and she felt her cheeks flush slightly. Her boss, Christopher Blake, had always been different from other executives at Marshall & Associates. While others barked orders through intercoms and demanded coffee at precise temperatures, Christopher treated everyone with genuine kindness. He'd notice when someone was having a rough day, remember birthdays, and actually listen when people spoke. The record she held was no ordinary gift. It was a pristine copy of Moonlight Melodies by the Night Wanderers, a somewhat obscure band from the early 80s. She'd overheard Christopher humming one of their tunes last week while reviewing contracts, and his eyes had lit up when she recognized the melody. "Wrap it up, please," Victoria said firmly, pulling out her wallet. The owner nodded, carefully placing the record in a protective sleeve before wrapping it in brown paper. The next morning, Victoria arrived early at the office, her heart beating a little faster than usual. The Marshall & Associates building stood tall against the morning sky, its glass windows reflecting the rising sun. Inside, the familiar scent of coffee and copying paper filled the air as she made her way to the 15th floor. She placed the wrapped record on Christopher's desk, alongside his morning reports and correspondence. A simple note attached read, "For the moments when paperwork becomes overwhelming, Victoria." As she settled at her desk outside his office, sorting through the day's appointments, she heard the elevator ding. Christopher's familiar footsteps approached, accompanied by the subtle scent of his cologne. Victoria pretended to be absorbed in her work, but her peripheral vision caught his tall figure passing by. "Good morning, Victoria," he said warmly, then paused at his door. "Another early start?" "Good morning, Mr. Blake. Just getting organized for the day," she replied, looking up with what she hoped was a casual smile. She heard him enter his office, and then silence. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, waiting. The sound of paper being carefully unwrapped reached her ears. "Victoria!" his voice called out, softer than usual. She rose from her desk, smoothing her skirt before entering his office. Christopher stood behind his desk, holding the record with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How did you—" he began, then stopped, staring at the album cover. "I haven't seen this in— It must be—" But before he could finish his thought, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Blake, the Morgan account representatives are here for the morning meeting." Christopher carefully placed the record on his desk, his expression shifting back to professional mode. "Thank you for this, Victoria. Truly. Perhaps we could listen to it together later." Victoria nodded, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course, Mr. Blake. I'd like that." As she returned to her desk, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that something in Christopher's reaction had been off. The way he'd looked at that record. It wasn't just appreciation for a thoughtful gift. There was something else there. Something that made her wonder if she'd inadvertently stirred up more than just fond memories of good music. The morning progressed with its usual parade of meetings and phone calls, but Victoria's mind kept drifting to the record sitting in Christopher's office and to the mysterious look that had crossed his face when he first saw it. Little did she know that simple vinyl disc would unravel a story neither of them was prepared for. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Christopher's office door whenever she could. Through the frosted glass, she could see his silhouette as he moved about, conducting business calls and reviewing documents. The record remained on his desk, untouched but never quite forgotten. Late afternoon arrived with its golden light streaming through the office windows, painting long shadows across the carpet. Most of the staff had already left, leaving behind the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of telephones ringing on other floors. Victoria was finishing up some correspondence when Christopher's door opened. "Would you join me for a moment?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of something she couldn't quite identify. Anticipation, nervousness. The office had changed since morning. Christopher had pulled a vintage Crosley record player from somewhere, she'd never seen it before, and set it up on the credenza beneath the window. The Chicago skyline stretched out behind it, the setting sun turning the buildings into silhouettes. "I didn't know you had a record player here," Victoria said, watching as Christopher carefully removed the vinyl from its sleeve. "I keep it for special occasions," he replied, handling the record with practiced care. "Music helps me think sometimes, especially when I'm here late." The needle touched down, and after a moment of soft static, the first notes filled the room. It was Midnight in Manhattan, the album's opening track. The melody was haunting, filled with saxophone and piano that spoke of city nights and forgotten dreams. Christopher closed his eyes for a moment, and Victoria saw something cross his face. A shadow of memory, perhaps, or an old wound that had never quite healed. "I used to spend my evenings at a little jazz club in Greenwich Village," he said softly, almost to himself. "The Summer Club, it was called. They played this song every night at closing time." Victoria felt her breath catch. The Summer Club. On Sullivan Street. Christopher's eyes snapped open, fixing on her with sudden intensity. "You know it?" "My Aunt Lisa worked there," Victoria said, memories flooding back. "She was a waitress. I used to visit her sometimes after school, doing homework at the corner booth while she served drinks. The owner would let me stay if I promised to be quiet during performances." Christopher's face had gone pale. Lisa Williams." Victoria nodded slowly, realization dawning. "You knew her?" He moved to his desk, sinking into his chair as if his legs could no longer support him. She was very special to me. We were close, very close, but circumstances." He trailed off, lost in thought. The music continued to play, filling the silence between them with its bittersweet melody. Victoria remembered her Aunt Lisa talking about a young man who used to come to the club every evening, always sitting at the same table, always staying until closing. She'd been young then, more interested in her homework than in her aunt's stories about customers, but now— "You were the man in the grey suit," Victoria said, the childhood memory suddenly crystal clear. "The one who left roses on special occasions." Christopher nodded, a sad smile playing at his lips. "Your aunt. She was the kindest soul I'd ever met, but I was just starting my career, working 100-hour weeks at a law firm, barely making ends meet. She had dreams of opening her own restaurant. We were young, in love, but life got in the way," Victoria finished softly, remembering how her aunt had eventually moved west to pursue her culinary dreams, leaving behind the city and, apparently, much more than Victoria had ever known. "I never knew what happened to her after she left," Christopher said, his eyes distant. "I threw myself into my work, climbed the corporate ladder, told myself it was for the best. But this song—" He gestured to the record still spinning on the player. "It was playing the last night I saw her." Victoria felt tears pricking at her eyes. Her Aunt Lisa had passed away a few years ago, taking her stories and secrets with her. But here, in this office with the sun setting over Chicago, one of those secrets had finally come to light. "She did it, you know," Victoria said gently. "Opened her restaurant. It was small, but people came from miles around. She never married, but she was happy. She used to play this album in the kitchen while she cooked." Christopher stood abruptly, walking to the window. His reflection in the glass showed eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm gladdy," he said quietly. "She deserved all the happiness in the world. The record continued to play, its melodies weaving through the office like threads connecting past and present. Victoria watched Christopher's back, seeing him not as her boss now, but as the young man in the grey suit, leaving roses for her aunt in a dimly lit jazz club. "I had no idea when I bought this record," Victoria said. I heard you humming the tune, and something made me want to find it for you." Christopher turned back to face her, his expression soft. "Maybe some part of you remembered. Children see more than we give them credit for." He paused, studying her face. "You have her smile, you know. I should have noticed it before." The last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky, and the office lights had dimmed automatically. In the gentle semi-darkness, with the music playing softly between them, Victoria felt as though she was seeing her own life differently. The strange twists of fate that had brought her to work for Christopher, the unconscious memories that had drawn her to that particular record. "Would you—" Christopher hesitated, then continued. "Would you tell me about her life, her restaurant? I'd like to know if you're willing to share." Victoria smiled, feeling a connection to this man that went beyond their professional relationship, beyond even their current moment. It was a connection forged in the past, in a jazz club in Greenwich Village, where a young waitress and a man in a grey suit had fallen in love to the sound of this very song. "I'd like that," she said softly. The music played on as night settled over Chicago, and two people began to bridge the gap between past and present, between what was lost and what might still be found. They ended up at Sal's Diner, a retro establishment that had somehow survived the changing times. Chrome fixtures gleamed under fluorescent lights, and a jukebox in the corner played old Motown hits. It was the kind of place that belonged to their shared past, where the coffee was strong and the pie was always fresh. Victoria sat across from Christopher in a red vinyl booth, watching as he stirred cream into his coffee. The evening crowd had thinned out, leaving them in a comfortable bubble of relative privacy. Outside, the streets glistened from a recent rain, neon signs reflecting in puddles like watercolor paintings. "Lisa used to take me to a place just like this," Victoria said, running her finger along the rim of her coffee cup. "After her shifts at the summer club, when I stayed late, she'd order chocolate milk for me and coffee for herself, and we'd share a slice of apple pie." Christopher smiled, but his eyes held a distant look. "She always had a sweet tooth. There was this little bakery next to the club. I used to bring her pastries before her shift started. The one with the blue awning." Victoria's eyes lit up. She talked about those pastries for years. "Cherry Danishes, right? And chocolate croissants," Christopher added. "The owner, Mrs. Chen, would set aside the best ones for me. She knew they were for Lisa." The waitress arrived with their pie, apple for Victoria, cherry for Christopher. The familiar scent of warm pastry and cinnamon filled the air between them. "Tell me about the night you met," Victoria said softly, cutting into her pie. "Lisa never spoke much about her time at the club, at least not to me. I think it hurt too much." Christopher set down his fork, his expression thoughtful. "It was raining, much like tonight. I'd just lost a big case at the firm, my first real failure as a lawyer. I wandered into the summer club because I couldn't face going home. I wasn't even dressed properly. My suit was soaked, my tie askew." He paused, lost in the memory. "Lisa brought me a coffee without me ordering it. 'You look like you need this more than whatever's in that cocktail menu,' she said. She had this way of seeing right through people, right to what they needed most." Victoria nodded, remembering her aunt's uncanny ability to read people. She was like that with everyone. It's what made her such a wonderful chef later on. "I went back the next night," Christopher continued, "and the night after that, not because I was still upset about the case, but because I couldn't stop thinking about her smile, the way she moved through the club like she was dancing to music only she could hear." The jukebox switched to a slower song, one that made Christopher's eyes close briefly in recognition. Now this was playing the first time I asked her to dance. It was after closing. I'd stayed to help her stack chairs, though she never asked me to. The band was packing up, but the pianist played one last song, this song. Victoria listened to the familiar melody of "Stand By Me," filling the diner. She used to play this in her restaurant too. I never knew why it was so special to her. "We danced right there among the empty tables," Christopher said, his voice soft with remembrance. She'd been on her feet all night, but she said she'd never turned down a dance to this song. It became our tradition, one last dance, every night I stayed until closing. The weight of unspoken words hung between them. Victoria hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her since their revelation in the office. What happened? Why did you let her go? Christopher's face shadowed. He reached into his wallet and pulled out an old, creased photograph. It showed a younger version of himself and Lisa, caught mid-laugh outside the summer club. The blue awning of the bakery was visible in the background. The firm was sending me to London, he said, carefully smoothing the photograph's worn edges. A 2-year assignment that would make my career. Lisa had just been offered a chance to study at a culinary school in California. We were both on the verge of achieving our dreams, but those dreams were taking us in opposite directions. Victoria studied the photograph, seeing the joy in her aunt's face, the way she leaned into Christopher as if they were sharing a secret. She never told me about London, just that she needed to go west, to start fresh. I asked her to wait, Christopher admitted, his voice heavy with regret. To give me 2 years to establish myself, to build something solid for us. She asked me to come with her to California instead, to start something new together. We were both young, both stubborn. Neither of us wanted to be the one to give up our dreams. So you both walked away, Victoria finished quietly. Christopher nodded, taking back the photograph and returning it to his wallet. The night before I left for London, I went to the club one last time. That record was playing. Moonlight Melodies. We had our final dance, said our goodbyes, made promises we both knew we couldn't keep. By the time I returned from London, she was gone. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. She kept her copy of that record, you know. It was always displayed in a special place in her restaurant, though she never played it. When I asked her about it once, she just said it belonged to a time that was better left in the past. The waitress refilled their coffee cups, the clinking of porcelain bringing them back to the present moment. Christopher stirred his coffee absently, lost in thought. I tried to find her after I got back, he confessed, but she'd left no forwarding address, and this was before the internet made the world so small. I threw myself into work, built my career, told myself it was all for the best, but seeing that record today, hearing those songs again. Some loves leave marks on our souls, Victoria said softly, remembering something her aunt had once told her. They shape who we become, even if they don't last forever. Christopher looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing both the echo of Lisa and the unique person Victoria was in her own right. You're very wise for someone so young. I had a good teacher, Victoria smiled. Lisa may not have told me her love stories, but she taught me about life, about following your heart even when it leads you down unexpected paths. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city lights painted the wet streets in shades of gold and red. The diner had emptied except for them and an elderly couple in the corner, sharing a piece of pie just as they had probably done for decades. There's something else, Victoria said, reaching into her purse. Say something I've been carrying with me since Lisa passed, though I never knew why until now. She pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, the name Christopher written in familiar handwriting on the front. Christopher's hand trembled slightly as he took the envelope. She kept it all these years. Victoria nodded. It was in a box of keepsakes I inherited. She made me promise to keep it safe, said someday I'd know what to do with it. I think she knew our paths would cross eventually. Christopher stared at the envelope in his hands, the weight of years past pressing down on him like a physical force. The diner's ambient sounds faded away, the clink of dishes, the soft music from the jukebox, the murmur of distant conversations, all became mere background to the thundering of his heart. I'm not sure I can read this here, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria understood immediately. There's a park nearby, the one with the gazebo. It's usually quiet this time of night. They paid their bill and stepped out into the evening air, still fresh from the recent rain. The park was just as Victoria remembered it, with its wrought-iron gates and carefully maintained flower beds. The gazebo stood like a sentinel in the center, its white paint gleaming under the street lamps. Christopher sat on one of the gazebo's benches, the envelope still unopened in his hands. Victoria gave him space, moving to stand at the railing, watching the way the lamplight played on the wet leaves of nearby trees. The sound of tearing paper broke the silence. Victoria didn't turn around, giving him privacy as he unfolded the letter. She could hear his breathing change as he began to read. "My dearest Christopher," he read aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Victoria turned then, seeing the way his hands trembled as they held the paper. "If you're reading this, then my niece Victoria has found you. I always knew she would, somehow. There was something about her, even as a child, that reminded me of you. That same quiet determination, that ability to see the heart of things. I've written this letter 100 times in my mind over the years, but now that I'm finally putting pen to paper, I find myself struggling for words. How do you sum up a lifetime of what-ifs? How do you explain that sometimes the hardest choices we make are the right ones, even when they break our hearts? I want you to know that I don't regret California. The restaurant became everything I dreamed it would be. Every night, when I walked through its doors, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. But that doesn't mean I didn't think of you, of us, every time I heard our song, every time it rained, every time someone ordered cherry Danish. The truth is, Christopher, we were both right and both wrong that night. You were right that we needed to follow our dreams, to become the people we were meant to be. I was right that sometimes love means taking risks, jumping into the unknown together. But we were both wrong to think it had to be one or the other. I learned something important in all these years of cooking, of building something from nothing. The best recipes aren't about choosing between ingredients. They're about finding the right balance, the perfect harmony that makes each element shine brighter together than apart. We were too young then to understand that, too caught up in our own versions of the future, to see that there might have been a way to blend them together. But that's the beauty of life, isn't it? It gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, even if we don't recognize it at the time. I'm telling you this now not to stir up old regrets, but to set them free. We chose our paths, and they led us exactly where we needed to go. I became the chef I always dreamed of being. You, I'm sure, became the brilliant lawyer I always knew you would be. But there's one more thing you need to know. Victoria isn't just my niece. She's the daughter I never had. I've watched her grow into an extraordinary woman, and I've seen in her the best parts of both of us. Your determination, my passion for life, our shared belief in the power of dreams. Take care of her, Christopher. Not because she needs taking care of, she's stronger than either of us ever was, but because sometimes life gives us second chances in the most unexpected ways, and the next time you hear our song, dance. Dance for the young lovers we were, for the dreams we chased, for the lives we built. Dance for the joy of being exactly where you are, right now. With eternal love and gratitude, Lisa P.S. I kept the record all these years. Victoria has it now, though she doesn't know its full significance. Music has a way of bringing people together, doesn't it? Christopher lowered the letter, tears streaming freely down his face. Victoria felt her own cheeks wet with tears, understanding now why her aunt had always looked at her with such a mixture of love and something else, something she now recognized as hope. "She never told me," Victoria said softly, moving to sit beside him. "All those stories about the restaurant, about her life in California, she never once mentioned that she thought of me that way." Christopher carefully folded the letter, putting it back in its envelope. "Lisa always did have a way of loving people quietly, completely, without need for recognition. It was one of the things I loved most about her." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of Lisa's words, of the connections that had been there all along, unseen but unbreakable. "The record," Christopher said suddenly. "She said you have it now." Victoria nodded. "The one I gave you today. It was hers. I found it in her things, along with the letter. Something about it just felt important. I didn't know why until I heard you humming that tune." Christopher turned to face her, his expression soft with wonder. All these years, all these coincidences. Lisa was right. Life does give us what we need, exactly when we need it. The next few days at Marshall & Associates felt different. The usual rhythm of office life continued. Phones rang, meetings were held, Deadlines loomed, but there was an undercurrent of something new, something unspoken between Victoria and Christopher. They maintained their professional relationship, yet small changes began to appear. Christopher would bring 2 cups of coffee in the morning, leaving one on Victoria's desk without a word. Victoria would sometimes catch him looking at her with an expression that seemed to be trying to reconcile the present with the past, seeing both her and echoes of Lisa in every gesture. One morning, Victoria arrived to find a small package on her desk. Inside was a weathered menu from the summer club, preserved between sheets of clear plastic. A note attached read, "Found this in my old files. Thought you might want to have it." See, the menu was like a time capsule. Jazz performances listed in elegant script, cocktails with forgotten names, and there, at the bottom of the dessert section, Lisa's special apple pie, printed in slightly different ink, as if added later. Victoria was studying the menu when Christopher emerged from his office, adjusting his tie. "The owner added that to the menu after trying her pie one night," he said, noticing what she was looking at. "She used to bake it in the club's kitchen before her shift started. She kept making that same recipe at her restaurant," Victoria replied, smiling at the memory. "People would drive for hours just to taste it. She never wrote it down, though, said some things had to stay in your heart, not on paper." Christopher nodded, understanding. "Listen, I was thinking, the summer club building is still there. It's a bookstore now, but the space... Would you like to see it? Maybe this weekend?" Victoria looked up, surprised by the invitation. "I'd like that," she said softly. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made New York feel magical. They met outside the old building, its blue-painted facade now faded but still recognizable. The bookstore's window display featured leather-bound classics and modern bestsellers where the club's entrance used to be. "It's smaller than I remember," Victoria mused, looking up at the familiar brickwork. "Everything seems bigger when you're young," Christopher replied. He held the door open for her, a small bell chiming their arrival. The space had been completely transformed. Bookshelves now lined the walls where tables once stood, and the stage area had been converted into a cozy reading nook. But if you looked carefully, you could still see traces of the past. The original hardwood floors, the Art Deco moldings along the ceiling, the large windows that once let in the evening light for dancers. "The bar used to be right there," Christopher said, pointing to a long counter now displaying new releases. "And that corner, that's where you used to do your homework." Victoria walked to the spot, memories flooding back. "Lisa would bring me milk and cookies, tell me to stay put until she finished her shift. I used to watch the musicians setting up, pretending I was part of their world." They wandered through the store, their conversation drifting between past and present. Christopher pointed out where the band used to play, where he'd sat that first rainy night, where he and Lisa had shared their last dance. In the back of the store, they found a small cafe area, a nod to the building's history as a nightclub. They ordered coffee and sat at a small table near the window. "I've been thinking about Lisa's letter," Christopher said, warming his hands around his cup. "About what she said regarding second chances." Victoria felt her heart skip a beat, but kept her voice steady. "What about it?" "She was right about you, you know, about seeing parts of both of us in you. But she was wrong about one thing. You're not just an echo of our past. You're entirely your own person, and that's what makes this all so—" He trailed off, searching for the right word. Victoria waited, watching the play of emotions across his face. "Complicated," she offered. "Remarkable," he corrected. "Here we are, in the same place where everything began, but it's completely different now. We're different people, living different lives, yet somehow connected by more than just memories." Victoria understood what he meant. The weight of the past was there, but it wasn't a burden. It was more like a foundation, something to build upon rather than be trapped by. "I've been going through Lisa's old recipes," she said, changing the subject slightly. "The ones she did write down. I found one for those cherry danishes you used to bring her." Christopher's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? I thought maybe I could try making them sometime. I'm not much of a baker, but Lisa always said cooking was more about love than skill." "I'd like that," Christopher said softly, Then, after a moment's hesitation, "Victoria, there's something else. The company is opening a new office in California, near where Lisa's restaurant was. They're looking for someone to head up the legal department there." Victoria felt her coffee cup freeze halfway to her lips. Are you thinking of taking it?" "I've been considering it," he admitted, "but I wanted to talk to you first. Not as my secretary, but as someone who understands what it might mean, someone who shares this history." Victoria felt the world shift slightly on its axis. The familiar space of the converted club seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. Outside, a yellow cab honked its horn, the sound muffled through the old windows. "California," she repeated softly, tasting the word, "where Lisa built her dream." Christopher nodded, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table. "The restaurant building is still there. It's an Italian place now. But the locals still talk about Lisa's cooking. The realtor mentioned it when she was showing me properties in the area." "You've already looked at properties?" Victoria asked, surprised. "Just virtually, over the phone," he clarified. "I wanted to get a sense of the area before making any decisions. But seeing it, even just in pictures, it felt right somehow, like completing a circle." Victoria understood that feeling. Ever since reading Lisa's letter, she'd felt as though they were all part of some larger story, one that was still unfolding. "The position," Christopher continued, his voice careful, measured. "It would need someone to manage the administrative side of things, someone who knows how I work, who understands the business inside and out." Victoria's heart skipped a beat as she realized what he was suggesting. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a choice," he corrected gently. "The same kind of choice Lisa and I faced, but maybe with a bit more wisdom this time. You could stay here in New York, continue your career path. Marshall and Associates would be lucky to keep you, or I could go to California," Victoria finished, "work with you in building something new." "It wouldn't be easy," Christopher warned. "Starting over never is. But I think Lisa would have liked the idea of us taking this journey together, not running away from the past, but building on it." Victoria stood up suddenly, needing to move. She walked to the window, looking out at the street where the old club's entrance used to be. So many people had crossed that threshold, carrying their dreams and heartaches with them. Lisa had walked through that door countless times, young and full of hope, not knowing how her story would touch so many others. "When I was little," Victoria said, still looking out the window, "Lisa used to tell me that the hardest part of cooking wasn't following the recipe. It was knowing when to trust your instincts and try something new. She said life was like that too." Christopher joined her at the window, keeping a respectful distance. "And what do your instincts tell you now?" Victoria turned to face him. In the soft light filtering through the bookstore's windows, she could see traces of the young lawyer who had once sat at the club's bar, soaked from the rain and needing coffee more than cocktails. But she could also see who he was now, someone who had lived, learned, and was ready to take a chance on something new. "Before I answer that," she said, "I need to know something. This offer, is it because of Lisa? Because of what she wrote in her letter?" Christopher considered this carefully. "Lisa's letter opened my eyes to possibilities I hadn't let myself see before. But this isn't about fulfilling some obligation to her memory. It's about recognizing that sometimes life gives us second chances, not to relive the past, but to build something new from its foundations." He paused, then continued with careful honesty. "You're not Lisa, Victoria. You never have been, and that's not what this is about. You're someone who has shown extraordinary capability, kindness, and understanding. Someone who brought music back into my life when I thought those melodies were lost forever." Victoria felt tears pricking at her eyes. "The record shop owner tried to talk me out of buying it, said it was too expensive for a secretary's salary. But you bought it anyway. Something told me it was important. I just didn't know how important at the time." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city life flow past the window. The bookstore's bell chimed as customers came and went, each lost in their own stories. "There's one more thing," Christopher said finally. "Before you make any decisions, would you have dinner with me? Not as my secretary, not as Lisa's niece, but just as yourself, as Victoria." The question hung in the air between them, full of possibility. Victoria felt her heart racing, but her voice was steady when she answered. "I think," she said carefully, "that I'd like that very much." Their first dinner together took place at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Not the flashy establishments where business deals were made, but a family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in old Chianti bottles, the kind of place where the food was cooked with love and memories were made. Victoria arrived to find Christopher already there, looking different somehow in casual clothes rather than his usual business suit. He stood when she approached, and for a moment neither spoke, both aware that this evening marked a transition, a stepping over an invisible line between what was and what could be. "I hope you don't mind," Christopher said after they were seated, "but I took the liberty of bringing something." He reached down beside his chair and brought up a familiar record sleeve. "Sandy thought maybe, after dinner, we could find somewhere to play it." Victoria smiled, recognizing the copy of Moonlight Melodies she had given him. "I'd like that." The evening flowed naturally, their conversation moving effortlessly between shared memories and new discoveries. Victoria told stories about growing up with Lisa's influence, about learning to cook at her restaurant, about the dreams she had for her own future. Christopher shared tales from his early legal career, the challenges he'd faced, and the moments that had shaped him. "You know," Victoria said, twirling pasta on her fork, "Lisa once told me that the secret to her apple pie wasn't in the ingredients. It was in knowing that someone would smile when they tasted it. She said that's what made all the difference." Christopher nodded thoughtfully. She always did understand that the most important things in life weren't things at all. They were moments, connections, the way we touch each other's lives. After dinner, they walked through the city streets, the record tucked safely under Christopher's arm. The night was clear, the air crisp with autumn's promise, and the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. "There's something I need to show you," Victoria said suddenly, leading them down a familiar street. They stopped in front of Crown Records, its windows dark but the neon open sign still glowing softly. "The owner keeps late hours," Victoria explained, pushing open the door. The bell chimed their arrival, and the owner looked up from behind the counter, recognition lighting his face. "Ah, the secretary who bought the rare record," he said, smiling. "And this must be the special someone it was for?" Victoria led Christopher to the back of the store, where a vintage record player sat on a worn wooden table. "The owner lets customers play records before buying them," she explained. "I heard our song here first, the day I bought the record." Christopher carefully removed the vinyl from its sleeve, placing it on the turntable with reverent hands. The familiar crackle of needle-meeting groove filled the air, and then the music began, soft, sweet, and full of memory. "Would you dance with me?" Christopher asked softly, extending his hand. Victoria took it, and they began to sway gently between the aisles of records. The music wrapped around them like a warm embrace, bridging past and present, loss and discovery, endings and beginnings. "I've made my decision," Victoria said as they danced. "Say about California." Christopher held his breath, waiting. "Lisa always said that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a chance on something new," Victoria continued. "She and you were young when you faced your choice, but you both followed your dreams. I think it's time for me to follow mine." "And what are your dreams, Victoria?" She smiled up at him. "To build something meaningful, to honor the past while creating a future, to see where this path might lead." The music played on as they danced, witnessed only by the rows of records and the understanding smile of the store owner. Outside, the city continued its eternal dance of lights and shadows, but inside this moment, time seemed to stand still. "We'll visit her restaurant," Christopher promised softly. "Even though it's different now, we'll remember what it was. And maybe we'll find a way to bring a piece of it back to life. With cherry danishes?" Victoria asked, a teasing light in her eyes. "And apple pie," Christopher agreed. "We'll build something new, something that honors where we've been, but celebrates where we're going." As the song drew to a close, they remained swaying gently, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. The record crackled softly, a sound like gentle rain on windows, like memories being written, like promises being made. Lisa was right, Victoria said finally. About second chances coming in unexpected ways, about life giving us what we need, exactly when we need it. She was right about a lot of things, Christopher agreed, but mostly, she was right about you, about your strength, your heart, your ability to see the best in people and possibilities. The last notes of the song faded away, but they didn't step apart immediately. Instead, they stood there in the gentle silence, surrounded by thousands of records holding countless stories, knowing they were adding their own chapter to an ongoing tale. When Christopher finally leaned down to kiss her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. It wasn't a kiss overshadowed by the past or burdened by expectations. It was simply a beginning, written in the language of possibility and set to the melody of a vintage record that had brought them together. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere, perhaps, Lisa was smiling, knowing that love, like music, never truly dies. It just waits for the right moment to play again. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family. And don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.